Hello, Sumo fans, and welcome to the first episode of many in a new series I'm creating called Sumo Legends, which will be about those rikishi that came, saw, and conquered in their own way, impacting the sumo world forever. I'm Scott Findlay, and in this first installment, myself and a good friend of mine, honorary World of Sumo team member and sumo artist, Noah Wellbrock-Talley, will be joining me on his first narration. Don't worry, he is posh by name alone. He is American, so with the switch between my accent and his should be fun for all of your ears, sumo fans, and you're guaranteed to at least understand half of what gets said. We will take you through the life, career, and after sumo life of Akebono Tarō, sumo's 64th Yokozuna. So welcome to Sumo Legends, Akebono, Breaker of Chains. From starting out being doubted due to his long legs and top-heavy frame in his beginnings, his rivalries with brothers and fellow Yokozunas Wakatakage and Takanoahana, which was the reason for the popularity boom in the 1990s for sumo, to breaking down barriers and becoming sumo's first ever foreign-born grand champion, which is arguably the hardest level to obtain in any sport, never mind as the first foreigner to achieve this. With his imposing 500 plus pound and 6'8" frame, he created a shadow not only physically over his opponents, but also one of doubt in their minds and hearts, and had most bouts won even before the Tachiai. So, sumo fans, let's get right into it. Born Chadwick Haio Rowan on the 8th of May 1969 in Waimanalo, Hawaii, to a taxi driver of Irish and Native Hawaiian descent, and a mother who was an office worker of Cuban and Native Hawaiian descent. Playing basketball growing up in high school and became an all-star center. He went to the Hawaii Pacific University on a basketball scholarship, but after not really finding basketball interesting and having a lot of heated disagreements with his coach, he moved on. And actually, his first career choice after he did this was actually to try for a role in hotel management. A family friend introduced him to Azumazaki Oyakata, aka Jesse Kalua, aka the former Takanoiwa, who himself was a trailblazer for foreign-born rikishi, originally hailing from the Hawaiian Islands himself, being the first foreign-born rikishi to become sekiwake and won a Makuuchi Top Division Yusho Championship, which made him a mainstay in the hearts of the people of Japan, and that sweet ad money couldn't have hurt either. He is a legend in his own right and will become a subject of a future video in this series. Azumazaki Oyakata was at first concerned, along with others, that Rowan may be too tall and his legs far too long for sumo, as longer legs do not promote good balance. He eventually got over his concerns and took a chance on the future Yokozuna. Good choice for him, eh? Agreeing to let him join Azumazaki Bear. Arriving in Japan in early 1988, he admits that he spent the first few months crying every night and struggling to cope with everything. And that was it. Took the entrance exam, and a short time later, he made his professional debut in the world of sumo.
Chad Rowan premiered in Pre-Sumo in March of 1988. Originally called Taikai, a name which literally meant Great Sea and which doubled as a straightforward pun on the Japanese word takai, or tall, by the time he found himself officially listed on the Banzuke 2 months later, his name had changed to Akebono. This alteration was suggested by one of Azumazaki Stable's financial supporters, Tsunehiro Hagiwara, who had conceived of the name Akebono, meaning dawn, after meeting Chad for the first time and watching him rise from his seat to exchange greetings. Hagiwara has remarked of the encounter that it seemed he would never stop rising, like the sun coming up in the morning. Debuting alongside Akebono that March were two young men who would play instrumental roles in the Hawaiian's own growth as a rikishi, the brothers Masaru and Koji Hanada, later known as Yokozuna's Wakanohana and Takanoahana respectively. As the sons of a popular ozeki from the 1970s and nephews of a fiercely successful yokozuna from the 1950s, the Hanadas were effectively sumo royalty, and from the day they debuted were being touted as the future of the sport. So, when Akebono was set to fight the young Takanoahana, then called Takahanada, on the third day of his first official sumo tournament in May of 1988, the possibility of victory was written off by virtually everyone, including his coach, who told him, "You won't win, just don't get hurt." Fired up by these remarks, Akebono proceeded to blast Takahanada out of the ring during their match that day, using his abnormally long reach to box out his smaller foe and leaving no room for a counterattack. While rough around the edges, it was clear even this early on that Akebono was developing a fighting style which would make the most of his unique physical attributes. He would finish his debut tournament with a record of 6 wins and 1 loss. Helping in the development of Akebono's style was an associate of Azumazeki Oyakata, the Dr. Bob Beveridge, who, among other things, owned and operated a gym which the young rikishi would begin to frequent. Beveridge made it clear that, if Akebono wished to avoid having his height exploited by smaller opponents, he would need to strengthen his legs and maintain a wide stance, lowering his center of gravity and stabilizing his massive bulk. Beveridge also helped Akebono to develop his pre-match ritual, which drew on the hypnotherapeutic belief that one could enter an altered state of consciousness driven by neural signals which would increase one's awareness and reaction time. For Akebono, this practice involved rolling his eyes into the back of his head and clapping his hands together right before the start of the match, unintentionally creating an expression which would come to be known and feared throughout the world of sumo. Akebono would ride up the Banzuke on a steady string of winning records, reaching the second highest Judo division in March of 1990 after just 11 tournaments. In his first tournament at this level, Akebono would once again face and defeat both Hanada brothers to achieve a modest winning score of 8 wins against 7 losses. In the following 2 tournaments, however, he would post consecutive double-digit winning records of 11 wins against 4 losses, securing his promotion to sumo's upper echelon.
Making his Makuuchi debut in September 1990 at Maegashira 14, a 9-6 in his first basho at Makuuchi, followed by another in his second in the November 1990 tournament at Maegashira 7, where he was also awarded his first special prize for fighting spirit, saw him make a statement straight away with the big dogs of sumo. He wasn't done yet either, as in 1991 January, he earned his first gold star or kimboshi victory for defeating a Yokozuna. Yokozuna Asashoryu to be exact, now Isegahama Oyakata, and received his first outstanding performance prize at Maegashira 1, securing his Sanyaku debut at Komusubi in just 4 years since joining the world of sumo. The following tournament in March 1991, he defeated ex-Ozeki Konishiki in a bout with special meaning for both men, as it was the first ever match between 2 non-Japanese wrestlers in the top division. Akebono also received another outstanding performance prize for his outing in this basho, but spent the rest of that year producing 8-7 or 7-8 records near the top of the Makuuchi division, while floating between Sanyaku's Sekiwake and the rank and file Maegashira spots. Although it must be said, at these short periods when he was a rank and filer, he managed to earn 3 more kimboshi victories against Yokozunas, Hokutomi, Asashoryu again, and Onokuni. But it wasn't until January 1992 when he suddenly came alive and really put that 500-pound and 6'8" frame to good use, with a 13-2 narrowly losing the top division championship to his biggest rival Takanoahana, but earned 2 more special prizes for outstanding performance and fighting spirit. He had arrived. A second 13-2 record 2 tournaments later in May saw him win the top division championship for the first time, along with another award for outstanding performance, and with it became the second foreign-born rikishi in history to be promoted to the rank of Ozeki, after, of course, the legendary Konishiki, who will also be another subject for a future video in this series. And by the way, sumo fans, if you want more content until then, why not check out our Road to Glory series and Rise and Fall series, where I take you through the ups and downs of rocky careers and races for Yusho wins from all your favourite rikishi. Link in the description for those. And please like this video to support the channel, and why not leave a comment and let us know what you guys think and who you would like to see documented in future videos on the channel. Let's get back to Akebono's journey. An injury in the summer of 1992 seen him having to sit out of the Nagoya Basho that year, which was also his first tournament at the rank of Ozeki, but he returned for September, scoring a 9-6, and went on to win 2 consecutive Makuuchi championships in November 1992 with a 14-1 and January 1993 with a 13-2 to win promotion to the highest rank in sumo, Yokozuna. At the time of his promotion, the other Yokozuna had all retired by the previous year, and the rank of the Yokozuna had been vacant for 8 months. This is a very rare occurrence, believe it or not. And his promotion went ahead despite the fact that there were those who thought a non-Japanese person could not become a proper Yokozuna, as they were incapable of Hinkaku, which basically means you have the right strength, skill, dignity / grace / humility sort of thing. Akebono, of course, did an amazing job of carrying himself in this way though. He stayed quiet and calm and used his presence on the clay to shut those doubters down. He had met the stipulation of winning 2 consecutive tournaments that had been mentioned by the Yokozuna Deliberation Council when turning down Konishiki the previous year, and was also seen as having conducted himself with a high level of dignity and humility, like I mentioned, necessary for such an exalted rank. So thus donned the white robe and laid claim to his permanent stamp on the clay.
Akebono began his Yokozuna career with a modest 10-5 showing, but returned to form immediately after, claiming runner-up honors in May. During the July 1993 tournament, Akebono finished the final day tied level with both of the Hanada brothers. In the event of a 3-way tie, the wrestlers take turns fighting one another, with the first man to land 2 wins in a row taking home the title. This meant that the possibility of an historic first-ever meeting between 2 brothers to decide a championship was on the line. The Yokozuna was quick to douse this dream, however, when first he steamrolled Wakanohana and then Takanoahana, walking away with his 4th Yusho in the process. Tragically, Akebono's father, Randy Rowan, was forced to watch his son's staggering achievement from a Hawaiian hospital bed. After many years suffering the effects of largely unchecked diabetes, Randy found himself on his deathbed, passing away just after the end of the tournament. Akebono's resolve never wavered in the wake of his father's passing, and he proceeded to win the following 2 tournaments as well, for a total of 3 in a row, something few Yokozuna have ever achieved. All of this is made even more impressive in the scope of the sumo landscape at that time. In 1993, a merger between 2 of the sumo world's larger stables was approved, bringing together under one roof all of the men of both the Fujishima and Futagoyama stables, for a grand total of 50 wrestlers, including 10 in the top division. As wrestlers are forbidden from fighting members of their own stables, except in the event of a playoff, this meant that many of the sport's top men, including the 2 Hanada brothers, were not allowed to fight one another. As a result, Wakanohana and Takanoahana were regularly granted easier schedules, fighting lower-ranked opponents than their peers. Akebono, by contrast, had to fight all of the highest-ranked rikishi every single time. For a time, Akebono's performance as a Yokozuna was one of unrestrained dominance, leaving no doubt that he was indeed the strongest man in sumo. This wave of superiority came to a halt, however, on the 11th day of the 1994 Natsubasho, when the Grand Champion landed awkwardly on one of his knees, losing to the new Futagoyama Super Stable's Takatoriki. Upon having his knees examined, it was revealed that much of their cartilage had degraded over time, the result of the strain placed on his body by supporting so much weight in such a low, wide stance. Unusually for a rikishi of the time, Akebono elected to have surgery rather than simply listening to the wisdom of his coach, and sat out for 2 whole tournaments to heal. Unfortunately, Akebono would never perform at the same level of dominance he had experienced prior to this injury, and would find himself struggling with his feet, knees, and lower back for the rest of his career. In his absence, Akebono's arch-rival Takanoahana had managed to start a Yokozuna run of his own, and by the end of 1994 had secured his promotion on the back of 2 consecutive Zensho Yusho. His brother, Wakanohana, would join them both at the rank 2 years later. The mid to late 1990s were a period of personal challenge for Akebono. He has spoken of his struggles with injury as a humanizing moment, one which caused him to reevaluate his idea of himself. Forced to consider what would be left once his glory as Akebono had gone, the Yokozuna became more focused on domestic matters. By the end of 1996, he had become engaged to Yu Aihara, a tarento or Japanese television personality, but broke it off the following year as the Yokozuna began to feel his hasty charge towards marriage was more motivated by cultural expectation than it was real love. He would find that real love in 1997 when he met Christine Reiko Kalina at a Maryland University graduation party. Kalina was a teacher of Japanese and American descent, and the pair announced their engagement in February of 1998, marrying later that year. Together they have 1 daughter and 2 sons. Akebono became a Japanese citizen in 1996, foregoing his American citizenship and changing his legal name from Chad Rowan to Akebono Tarō, as required by Japanese law. When asked about the somewhat negative perception by other foreigners regarding this change, Akebono is quoted as saying, "Changing my nationality has nothing to do with who I am, just like I am still my mother's son, even after I became Japanese." He changed in the ring as well, shifting away from the explosive pushing attack that he had ridden up the ranks in favor of a more orthodox and controlled belt fighting style. While he still saw success through this style, managing double-digit wins in all but one of the tournaments he was to complete at Yokozuna, he only managed to win 2 championships between his injury in 1994 and the turn of the millennia. Meanwhile, Takanoahana, with the help of the Futagoyama army, had picked up a total of 20 Yusho by 2000, and new Yokozuna Musashimaru, with his own stable of top rankers, had swept up his own fair share of titles. By this time, following sporadic absences and another substantial Yusho drought, much discussion was being had by the Japanese public concerning Akebono's retirement, with the Japanese press expecting an announcement could be made at any moment. The Sumo Association, much to Akebono's surprise, offered him their support instead, reminding him of his value as a Yokozuna. With the JSA behind him, Akebono endeavored to battle on, taking one more shot at a comeback. He returned to his roots, once again employing the furious thrusts that were the hallmark of his early career to devastating effect. Akebono spent the year 2000 effortlessly blasting any and all lower-ranked opponents from the dohyo with ease, making short work of a powerful lineup of 5 ozeki and trading wins with his Yokozuna contemporaries. He won 76 of a possible 90 bouts that year, including 2 more tournament championships for a career total of 11, placing him among the ranks of the so-called Dai Yokozuna.
After his retirement, he became a member or elder of the Japan Sumo Association as an Oyakata, and allowed to use his ring name, just like ex-Yokozuna Kakeru was allowed upon his retirement last year, and worked with his former mentor in Azumazeki stable as a coach. He also helped train the ferocious first Mongolian wrestler to obtain Yokozuna status himself, and as many of you know, my all-time favourite rikishi, Asashoryu Akinori, Morning Blue Dragon. Becoming friends with him, and also being the one to instruct him on how to perform the Doyoiri, or Yokozuna ring entering ceremony when he made the rank. While an Oyakata, Akebono also appeared in many TV commercials and even opened a restaurant called Zuna, which sadly failed and had to close down within a couple of years. Akebono left the Sumo Association by November 2003. This decision was heavily influenced by financial problems the ex-Yokozuna faced due to the failure of his restaurant, among other financial difficulties. He also, of course, earned far less as an Oyakata than he had as an Yokozuna. But he did state in an interview that one of the biggest reasons he left the Japanese Sumo Association was he had asked if one day there was a chance he could be the head of the Japanese Sumo Association, being the first foreigner to do so, just like he had Yokozuna. But he was promptly told no, and realized that he had no future there.
Not long after his decision to part ways with the Sumo Association for good, Akebono found his itch to compete returning. Coupled with the desire to improve his earnings in his post-sumo life, Akebono turned to K1, a Japanese kickboxing promotion. Unfortunately, his time with the sport was lackluster at best and tumultuous at worst. The ex-Yokozuna only managed a single victory in his 10 professional fights as a kickboxer, when he bested Nobuaki Kakuda by unanimous decision in 2005. There was little skill transfer from sumo to kickboxing, and unfortunately, Akebono suffered problems with his stamina, and his long legs were easy targets for smaller, swifter opponents. He would transition to MMA down the line, but saw no success there either, losing all of his 4 professional matches. It is remarkable that the man had the willpower to step into those arenas following such a long and grueling career in the world's most punishing sport, but unfortunately the Japanese people gave him little such credit, and among many his reputation suffered. Akebono also worked for many years in the field of professional wrestling, debuting in 2005 and appearing as a part of various promotions over the course of the following decade.
Akebono, on the 4th of December 2015, announced he was forming this new wrestling promotion, Oda. He would serve as its president with the backing of Mitoko Baba, the widow of All Japan Wrestling's founder Giant Baba. Its first event was held on the 20th of April that year and seemed to be finding success, as just months later, on September 16th, Oda formed a partnership with Pro Wrestling 01. Akebono's last recorded match happened on the 11th of April 2017. In the same month, he was hospitalized after feeling unwell while on a wrestling tour in Kitakyushu. Early reports indicated that he had been placed in a medically induced coma after suffering a cardiac condition, but his family later released a statement on Akebono's website criticising misleading articles and saying he was undergoing treatment due to cellulitis in his right leg and an infection. A family spokesperson thanked Akebono's fans for their support, saying, "The number of messages from around the world has been overwhelming." The Wrestling Observer newsletter then reported that the original story was in fact correct, and that the cellulitis claim was a cover story for a serious heart issue. It wasn't until March 2018 when Akebono's wife herself confirmed that her husband had suffered acute heart failure and was in a medically induced coma for 2 weeks. He lost nearly 130 pounds, much of it in muscle, and could not walk as of March 2018, requiring a wheelchair to get around. He was to begin intensive physical therapy. News regarding Akebono's health had been scarce. A news article from January 2nd, 2019 stated that he had not only lost the use of his legs, but also suffered partially from memory loss. He was unable to remember his professional wrestling days after retiring from sumo, and was for a short period unable to speak without the aid of his wife. He was visited by one of his former rivals while in hospital and still good friend of his, the ex-Yokozuna Wakatakage. It was clear he did not lose his sense of humour and positive attitude despite such health problems. When Wakatakage and he held hands, Waka said he wants to meet up, he wants him to recover and get back on his feet so they can meet again. And Akebono joked, "Yes, and go and get a good heavy drink." I mean, you've got to get to the guy. His outlook was alright considering the situation he was in. Although still unable to walk, he attended a memorial service for his former Tsukibito, Ushio Maru, at Azumazeki Stable in December 2019. This was only the second time he had been back in the sumo world since leaving back in 2003. The first being in June 2013 when he returned to Azumazeki Stable to oversee some training sessions as an assistant instructor for a short period. Today he is living out of the public eye, doing his best to recover at home with his family's support after a life of battling for the masses. Akebono faced many struggles in his life. He changed the minds of an ancient system steeped in tradition and culture. He broke the chains from a door thought impossible to open for non-Japanese when he became sumo's first foreign-born Yokozuna and laid the road for others to follow suit. Winning the hearts of millions around the globe, he was instrumental in bringing many foreign eyes to our beloved sport and helped bridge gaps across oceans and extinguish stereotypes, bringing populations together across the world to see these giants of the clay battle it out for supremacy the same way they have for hundreds of years. Remember Akebono not as the man with these health problems. Remember the giant he was, both physically and in sheer presence in the world of sumo. What he achieved in his life is what most of us can only dream about. He embodied what it meant to be a grand champion and will forever have his name high on that list of sumo greats. He is and forever will be a sumo legend.